Okay, good morning and welcome to our CalPads network meeting for May 17th. It's our final uh, CalPads network meeting of the year, and it couldn't come sooner. Maybe you're feeling the same way. I still see people rolling in, but Hillary, do you have the agenda? Can you drop the link to the agenda in the chat? And we will get started. So for today, just a quick overview of the agenda. We have a lot on the plate. I can almost guarantee you we won't get through all of it. So just a quick welcome and housekeeping, and then we're going to talk about the post-process redevelopment project and concerns and what's being done. Some assessment updates, SELPA updates, end of year updates, and then some additional reminders. And then we have our vendor breakouts, which we have separate links for. And I will say right now, two of our vendors, we have both our Power School and Aries are going to be joining us, but Synergy is doing in-person trainings throughout Southern California, so they weren't able to join us. And I didn't hear back from Equitas, but if Equitas joins us, please let us know, and we'll make sure that your link gets shared with your folks. So the team, our accountability and data literacy team includes me. I'm Evan Bartleheim. I'm the project director of accountability and data literacy. My colleague Hillary Weisman, who's here with me, and Margarita Sandoval, who's our administrative support. You may notice we have a name missing, Jaime Oliveros, although he's in the meeting. Our beloved Jaime left us. I think that happened after our last meeting. And I kind of think of Jaime as like a smoke jumper, right? He went from our LACOE data and accountability unit and jumped right into the fire by joining Montebello Unified, where he'd worked for 17 years previously, but he joined as the CalPads coordinator over there. So boy, perfect timing, Jaime. We're glad we have you back, and he's been my frontline outreach for what it's like in the trenches, and it's kind of rough for him. Yeah, exactly, Sven. Good luck, Jaime. But fortunately, he had a lot of great contacts from his work here, so I'm sure some of you are going to get your phones burning up with his request for support. Sorry. So just a little housekeeping. If you haven't, just make sure your full name's showing in the chat. If you want to add your LEA name, that's always helpful, so we know if in subsequent responses. Use the chat to post your questions and comments. We're going to have a lot of opportunities to weigh in today. I did have everybody muted. If you really want to talk, you can raise your hand to ask to unmute. And just so you know, we are recording this, and we will post it within 24 hours in the agenda. We'll also send it out with any updates and any responses to questions. So we do have a lot of stuff in our agenda. I'm just going to quickly go over to our agenda. And just a lot of links that I dropped in here. There's a lot going on. I would really like to point out, I think it's a pretty handy link here, this CalPads Q&A chat log with the timestamped responses. If you've been joining the CalPads Q&A, there's so much covered. Honestly, my head's swimming. I've been joining every day, and it's just almost too much. But they have done a wonderful thing. They're starting to timestamp all the and basically log all of the questions and the responses. So you can, if you see something that's relevant to you, you can click on it. It'll take you to the YouTube video. It takes a while for them to do that, so it's a little bit backed up. I don't think they're not as current as of yesterday. I think they're up to like 5.9 of last week. But definitely give that check that out. And then we have some other links in here. When we get to them, I'll mention that they're in the agenda. So back to our PowerPoint. So just a quick reminder of the purpose, and it's never probably more meaningful than right now. We're really here to share just timely information about CalPads issues, to build a better understanding of CalPads impact and reach, and boy, do we feel it now. We like to connect our network members with each other to build capacity, and that's been really helpful. I've actually been able to connect some new folks with more veteran CalPADS folks to help build the capacity just to get really just navigate through these things. And similarly, I've been benefited from your insights to me and giving me some great context that I've had conversations with to help my understanding. And then collective problem solving. And honestly, I don't know that we'll be able to solve any problems here today, but if we can, great. The complexity of the problems is just kind of beyond the scope of this meeting. Clearly, it's kind of beyond the scope oftentimes of the CalPADS Q&A, where you've got a team of CSIS and CDE representatives who can't even answer all the questions there. There's just too many unknowns right now. But to the extent that we can help each other, that's kind of my goal here. And to that end, sorry, I keep on freezing up here. I just want to note that we are not, things have changed drastically. I just talked to my colleague Hillary this morning. It's like a year ago, we had Brandy joining our meetings, and it just was so empowering, and then we had the shift to these quarterly regional meetings, and that's great. It's better that everybody in the state has access to Brandy and the other CDE folks. And similarly, they added the CalPADS Q&A on Wednesday, so you have the CSIS team answering that. We don't have that level of technical expertise. I was an LEA CalPADS administrator, but it's changed since I was in that role, and it's just gotten more complex. So I do my best. My role is really trying to harness both the network and get people in touch, but also to make it to give meaning to the information and make sure that people who need to know get to know, and building capacity to help you leverage all the people on your team. Because I think one of the things that's really clear now is you need help. You can't be isolated and alone and get the job done. It's just too much right now. And to try and reinforce that. So hopefully today, some of the things that we discussed in the presentation, use the presentation and say, hey, this is what LACOE's saying. And I think, it's meant to build you, to give you some leg to stand on. I see Sean is already commenting, and that's one of the takeaways that I'm not even going to venture into some of the technical aspects, but please feel free. If you have some workarounds, we'll stop at some specific points. Some workarounds that you discovered. I know there's some really ingenious people who found workarounds that are getting them through stuff. Please drop them in the chat. And if you need to, maybe leave connections or email to connect with one another. So yeah, and with regards to meetings, just a note about some upcoming meetings. Obviously, we have the weekly CalPADS Q&A. Right now, it's actually meeting Wednesday, and Friday until the troubles subside. And then next year the dates, hopefully save the dates. The registration isn't available, but for those quarterly regional CalPADS update meetings. And just as a reminder, you can attend any of those. They don't record them, so you're welcome to attend any or more than one. And then our LACOE CalPADS network, we've kind of reoriented mid-year this year, but we're going to continue this because I think it works out. So we'll follow the quarterly regional meetings by a little more than a week. And we actually have another meeting in between the regional CalPADS meeting. It's for county offices, where Brandy gives us some information that they ask us to share or to get feedback from you. So that works out pretty well for us to have a week to kind of digest and to add that element of additional things that the CDE is trying to gather information on. And so next year, our dates are there. For now, all our dates are scheduled as virtual meetings, just because that's currently LACOE's standing for opening rooms. And I don't know. We'll send out an email when we can open rooms to see if anybody wants to come back in person. And then as of right now, those CalPADS information meetings are TBD, right? For October and April. We'll see if those happen. So let's just dive right into all the fun, the post-process redevelopment project. I just pulled this. This is a screenshot I pulled down yesterday about the upload processing methods, and just this note, warning in bright red, bold letters, right? That due to the implemented post-redesign project changes, some of the processing methods listed below may no longer be valid. Please proceed with caution. I think that's please proceed with caution is what everybody's kind of adhering to, and people I've talked to have all felt similarly. Like, I don't want to do too much until this is kind of cleaned up, because if I generate a ton of errors that I don't know if they're real errors or false errors, it just has me running around in circles. So some of the issues and some of these have been resolved, but if you've been listening in on the CalPADS Q&A, that clearly the data wasn't properly migrated. There are issues with that. It's the historical, a lot of history. I remember in 2012 when I was working in Las Virgenes, and my fellow director of the chief technology there officer mentioned CALPADS. I was reviewing reports from. He said, "This is just going to get tighter and tighter." And boy, could not tighter, just tighter and tighter, but bigger and bigger, right? And so the complications and the context for how much is gathered out of this data has only gotten bigger. But we also see that the input validations are not working properly, and that's causing a host of issues. The APIs were not functioning properly. We'll get to some self-information, and we'll kind of dive in there to see, some of these have been fixed seemingly. But the talk going back and forth, it's not clear to me if it's going both ways. The jobs are taking up normally a long time to post. They do think that they've resolved that. They did get everybody out of that stuck position, I believe. So that's good news. But if you're still getting stuck, please weigh in the chat, because we do communicate to the CD anything that we hear. We're happy to write it up and send it. And they have put the priority, as you know, on resolving the issues affecting testing, but that leaves a lot of stuff still undone, right? So if you were waiting to have something fixed, it's taking a backseat to getting all the SPRG, the SIMP, and the CELA file errors corrected. And there's a link in there to the known issues page. I'm sure you're intimately familiar with that right now. So our concerns, and I say our as a collective we. This has created a significant increase in the time demands on LEAs who are attempting to determine real errors versus false errors. I think that's part of the reason why people have stepped back a little bit from all but the most critical submissions. It's caused significant delays in many cases of students getting into TOMS, with both the students getting in, having tests assigned, and having the appropriate accommodations in TOMS. There's been potentially, there will be impact on the participation rate for CASP and LPAC that are caused by these delays. And potentially delays, well, not even potential, delays to the end of year submission process that are going to lead possibly to inaccurate data, because staff is going to be leaving with inadequate time to review the necessary data to make sure it's accurate. And finally, I think the big one that a lot of people are frustrated about is, it was already, we're being back into accountability. I'll talk a little bit about that. We're going back into a period of accountability with a dashboard. We already knew, based on the situation that a lot of our students are in, and the circumstances this last year with COVID, that there were going to be some craziness related to chronic absenteeism, probably some craziness in some districts related to suspension. Now you throw in lowest obtainable scale score measures for the academic indicators for ELA and math, and the impact that may have, and people are really worried, like, all of a sudden I'm really being held accountable for stuff that's totally out of my control, and particularly this. And don't forget, and I'm like, what am I not including here? And I haven't been monitoring closely the chat, but what are some other things that people have been experiencing, or other concerns? If you want to drop something in the chat that I didn't talk about, what is a concern you have about the possible impact of these delays, or what frustration it's causing you?
Evan, it looks like Carla and I are having the same issue with some bogus old legacy CELA records showing up. So kids that we've thought have been EO for a decade are all of a sudden showing up as EL for no apparent reason. And we're having to connect with those districts to try to clean those up. And those districts have not been super responsive. So it's actually negatively impacting our testing right now. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the weirdest ones too. I thought there was a chance that the fix that went in last Wednesday would have fixed the CELA issues, and it clearly did not. I heard this, I saw this in the Q&A on Monday, that there's still people experiencing that. Chris, you're experiencing that. That is really frustrating. These students who are these kind of mysterious students that it's not even kind of logical, and it's the sorting order. District's not able to delete or alter the CELA records. That's a problem too, right? So yes, thank you.
And thank you, Sherry, for sharing that. I wasn't even aware of that. We've only had a few but the districts have been unresponsive. So we didn't know that they couldn't even clean them up. So that's helpful. That takes some of this, the stress off those other districts. We won't sweat them quite as much. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So yeah, and I will say, we were one of the issues, obviously, with the percentage testing and whether or not we get all our students tested and the impact of a loss is these students who are there in error. It presents a logistical challenge, obviously, but I have heard reassurance that those can all be cleaned up right in the window before it goes onto the dashboard. So, and I don't know what all might go into that, but students who are showing up erroneously. I saw one the other day where a student was enrolled, had left the district, was still showing up for CAS testing eligibility, and the district was very nervous that this student is showing up. They're not even enrolled there anymore. How's the student showing up on their list and they're showing up? Is this going to affect the participation? The CDE reassured this person that this is an error that will be corrected and it won't affect the participation rate. Yeah, Betsy, mystery student show up in my room. No idea who she is. I know there's mystery students. These are the weird ones. And Sue Ann, I know I've seen so many of your questions in the Q&A. So thank you. I will try to summarize these, and I don't think my director for accountability and support monitoring, Dina Wilson, has joined, but we are concerned. And Dina is the accountability chair for CCESA, and so I've raised this to her attention, these concerns, and I know I'm going to get to this next, but there has been some response, whether it's satisfying or not. A letter went out from Jerry Winkler to the district superintendents and charter administrators acknowledging the problems. Numerous organizations, AXA, CCESA, CSBA, they've shared their concerns with CDE leadership about the potential impact of these problems. So we do know that there is an awareness, and I do think that the response from CSIS, I think nobody blames our folks at CSIS or CDE. It's funny, Brandy couldn't have picked a better time to go on vacation. I hope she went someplace really wonderful, but it's got to be really stressful when so much is out of your control. And they've been really great at they've been really great at responding and being really transparent about what they can and can't know. They've been really great. So they have responded, and they, like I said, they prioritized the problems affecting testing. And yet for some of our districts, it wasn't quite soon enough, just because there was, some of our districts, one of our districts is actually, the last day of school is this Friday. So they had a whole slew of newcomer students. And this is another thing that we can't have predicted. Like, you've got newcomer students coming from Afghanistan, Ukraine, Central America, and showing up this time of year, and you need to be initial LPAC and then turn around and summative LPAC in that crazy window, which would be hard enough if you had like no problems, but now you've got the added delays in getting them in. And so I think that that's a big concern too, that, even with the efforts to address the problems testing, you're clearly having some ongoing problems. So.
Evan, can I ask a question? This is Rebecca from Lancaster.
Hi, Rebecca. Yes.
Hi. Just curious. I'm already kind of made a prediction, but have you heard anything about the fact that the data is what it is? We're getting really, really close to the time when people will leave, like you said, and we won't have anybody here to either fix data that they supposedly input or validate it. So my prediction is that they're going to make this either the EOYs not like no repercussions if we don't certify, or just to say not submitted at all. Is that a possibility at this point? Do you know?
I haven't heard that, but that's kind of beyond my pay grade, I guess. We haven't had they canceled our COE CALPADS meeting, until things could get clearer. I do know that the response from the feds is, this is your ESSA requirement, and we're not gonna waive it because of a self-inflicted wound. So I think there is still an expectation. I guess my only consolation here, and that's kind of what this slide is about, is we need some perspective. We're all in the same boat, right? Everybody's going to have an equally, well, maybe not equally. If you have really clean data, you're probably in better shape. But definitely, we're all going to be impacted by it, and so it will be universal. Yeah, the extended deadline, there's an extended, well, we can't even get started yet, but there definitely is, we'll see if the amendment window can be extended longer. We know in the past that they've taken longer to get the dashboard up as a result of the time it took to get data in. If you recall, when we had the extended window for LPAC testing last summer, that then extended our window for the dashboard. It didn't get up until January. So I do think that there is a possibility that we'll see some extensions either on the amendment window or even this initial submission certification. So stay tuned on that. Certainly, that would be some relief, because I know a lot of people are not 12-month employees, so you're out the door during the summer, especially at some of the smaller LEAs. So that does make it incredibly challenging.
Thank you.
So yeah, I don't really, I wish I had better answers, and it's interesting. I heard this term the other day. Some of you may be familiar with it. I'd never heard it before, and it came out of a weird place. I'm listening to a book on mindfulness, and the presenter is a neuroscientist. It's an audio book, and she mentioned the term VUCA, which came out of the military science world, and it's a term that it's an acronym that stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I thought that was perfectly applicable for where we are right now. And mindfulness is a good way to kind of get through those situations. But just having a certain flexibility, and we oftentimes talk to students about their mindset. And really, in this circumstances, I too feel overwhelmed. Honestly, I just yesterday was completely overwhelmed after listening to the Wednesday, or I guess it was Mondays at 3, just because the sheer volume. And I just feel like it's so hard for an individual to get his or her head around. And, we're just trying to do our best. And it's like, as people have pointed out, there's never been one continuous, couple of years where everything's the same. Every year it's more and more and more, and change. And this is just kind of like the ultimate of, that change and the crash. So it's been very challenging. But yes, I hope you can find some moments to, reflect on, and seek out some inner peace and try to be flexible and accepting of what's to come. So I'm going to dive into the assessment updates just to cover these, and you've probably heard all these, but these are kind of upfront. They are a priority for folks. I'm sorry, just taking a look at the chat. And Hillary, will you just surprise me if something pops in the chat that you just want to call out? I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we currently just have a lot of some questions and some solutions going back and forth, and people kind of waiting for breakout groups.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Okay, sounds good. The CAS portal does now have an update with the latest. This hasn't been updated much, but the link is in the PowerPoint. You've probably seen it though, but this is just helpful, I guess, in putting these problems at the forefront for LEA, CASP, and LPAC coordinators. And our assessment unit has been having their Wednesdays at 1. I know I've seen some of you there as well, because some of you wear multiple hats. And we've been hearing these. We've had Bob Martin from ETS on trying to address these issues as they crop up, and certainly getting, directing the problems to the right people is important. Importantly, and you undoubtedly know this, just the timeline. The workaround basically is to get that CALPADS file posted. It's not happening continuously right now, but there are twice a week an update of the CALPADS file, so we can get the information in. And there is this turnaround. So the CALPADS file goes in on Monday, approximately 5 o'clock, and LEAs have changes to their into TOMS. for test assignments, remote testing, video permission, administration, window changes, exemptions, and then test registration is sent to the test interface by Thursday at 8 a.m. So, you know, there's always this delay. So oftentimes the direction given is, when was the last time you checked on this student, and is it right in CalPADS? And if it is, then wait for 2 days, which when you're see the clock ticking, it's kind of hard. Yeah, Sue Ann, I saw that. I was actually, Bob did kind of misstate that statement about the ability to manually post SPED records to CalPADS, because it still is being done by API. So that was a misunderstanding on his part. I know that the CSIS folks said they would correct that information, but yeah, he did misstate that, unfortunately, that it was within the CalPADS administrator control, and it's not. Hopefully you've all seen this. I did see something yesterday in the chat though, so still some concerns that not everybody's gotten the message that in contrast to the original guidance from 221, Flash 221, that urged LEAs to resolve their mids on the same day that the SCNR records are posted. Now they're saying, refrain, don't do anything, right? The better situation is at the end, we'll clean up the mids at the end of the testing window. There is an exception here, which is at least one, that LEA should merge a mid when a student with disabilities transfers within your testing window that transfers in. So the district, the receiving district obtains a new SSID, you're going to need to merge that student in order to get that the students with disability status and everything that it contains that. So you're going to have to get that student's original SSID merged. What they've now said in lieu of merging the mids, though, is there's an option for this SSID swap. And this is largely directed at your LEA CAST coordinators. I'm just making you aware of it. But yes, they acknowledge that per the initial guidance, and there was some confusion even in the timing. I was confused by the timing of the messages, because you got the message around halting the resolution of the mids, and then you get this message that went out to CalPADS coordinators talking about retiring SSIDs as though it were actively happening. I think it was just a little bit of not mixed messaging, just the wording was confusing to me. But in the case where you did have students who already had been given the new SSID, if the CalPADS coordinator retired an SSID and the student had tested in both under both IDs, so you could have an issue here that can be corrected by a SSID swap that was fairly common, it sounds like. So the process was offered by ETS to be corrected on their end, so there wouldn't be a gazillion STARS reports needed to be filed by LEAs. And there's a link in here for that SSID swap request, and that's all outlined in detail on the CASP.org website. And I know a lot of your LEA CASP and LPAC coordinators are familiar with this. So they outline in here just a process. If you do get if you have had the chance, if you did retire any of the SSIDs and you haven't already, share that list with your LEA LPAC coordinators, just so they know and they can look for those students who may have conflicting state student IDs in terms of testing. As you pointed out, there's still missing information in TOMS, and I'm not going to go into all the variations, but I would say that the takeaway is if you've got missing accommodations, make sure you look in CalPADS first. This is the direction to your assessment coordinator. So hopefully they're talking to you on a daily basis, just to make sure that the right information is in there before that processing dates, right? And make sure that maybe the correct information is in there and just hasn't posted yet to TOMS. If the student has the ELAS is incorrect, first check in CalPADS. Obviously, it sounds like what you're seeing is that CELA sort is out of sorts, right? And so it's defaulting to these really old ELAS files. So I thought that was supposed to be corrected, but I guess have you had any luck posting sending tickets to the CDE for those of you who have that? Sean, some of the SSID merges are not bringing over the complete records. I recall Angel saying that if this occurs, then place a ticket. Yeah, thank you, Sean. I think I heard that as well. Yeah. yeah, you're not getting full records over, so that's still causing problems. There's just been some mysteries. I remember we had at one of our Wednesdays at 1, we had a student who showed up all of a sudden in Tom's, but they were should have been LPAC eligible, but they didn't have a test assigned, so they couldn't test them still. Let's see, there's a ticket for that. That's kind of a big catchphrase. Got a ticket for that.
Yeah, but I think the critical thing is to make sure that for assessment, we're not being negatively impacted between now and May 27th. We literally have 10 days for LPAC testing, right? And it's like, if there's anything that we could do between now and then to make sure that kids who need the LPAC test get tested, and the kids who don't need it don't get it tested, erroneously. I think that it has to be the focus. We only have 10 days left, right? So I mean, it's push come to shove, and I've got 4 or 5 kids that are showing up as EL that are not in fact EL students, and we just have no way of cleaning that up through a STARS report or through a CALPADS response. If it's in fact a known issue, it probably won't get resolved until the testing window is closed. And I think we're gonna have to do some post cleanup on some of this stuff.
Well, we have sorry, it's Margarita from Paramount.
Hey, Margaret.
Just because I don't know what to do, but we have the opposite situation that we had students that are MIDs, but they got assigned a new ID in our district and were identified TBD, and it says they have to take the initial, but really they should be taking the summative, but we don't have a way of giving them the summative because they have to be identified as EL. And there's no solution to that, right?
I'm going to let somebody else weigh in. You brought this up in the.
Evan,
Yeah.
for those, sorry, Sean.
Hey, Sean.
Hi, Margarita. For those, I believe you can merge the mids for those because it's involving the testing. I know the directions they were a little confusing because at first they said merge all mids and then they said don't merge all. But when it comes for the testing purposes, I believe you can, the direction from Angela and Brandy were to go ahead and merge those mids because yes, it is preventing you from being able to get to that next level of testing.
So that student, I'm just afraid to merge the mids because I don't know how long it takes for that to happen. Takes 7.
It should be instant to be able to do so. And since you only have, if it's just that one, I would go in and do it manually. And to merge
I mean, for it to
mid.
get to Tom's for them to be able to test because they have to take the SBA math and ELA now.
Have they
So
already? Has that student already started testing?
No, we're just waiting because we don't know what to do.
Yeah,
But I'm worried
since
that
the student hasn't already tested, I would recommend going ahead and merging the mid before they try and take the test under the incorrect SSID.
But how long would it take for it to appear in Tom's?
You'd be on that same schedule then. Exactly. There you go, Evan.
Yeah, Margarita, that does sound like they haven't started testing, and that was what they were trying to avoid by saying stop with the mids. That would you'd have these kids who are partially tested under one SSID and partially under another, creating more work ultimately. But if you have no previous testing, then I think you can merge those and get them into the right test. So that's the bigger priority, because once the the testing window for LPAC is not set by the LEA, it's set by the state. But once the students are gone, they're gone. And I think to Chris's point, you've got this short window in which to get these students to the LPAC.
Yeah, so everybody's kind of agreeing to delete the TBD, but then we have a student that is identified new as bad, and we have to wait 7 days before we can test them. And because that's how long it's going to take for them to appear in Tom's and the test and the TDS. So
When
we're just running out of time, I guess. And
yeah, well, and one
I'm
thing I want to
just afraid to do anything.
yeah, so also just note that for accountability purposes, and I think this it's almost too complex here, but there depending on the length of your testing window, there is a 14-day grace period at the beginning and a 14-day grace period at the end. And if you're getting close, if a student enters in that 14-day grace period at the end, and it's calendar days, not school days, you're not held accountable for them if you can't test them. So if your testing window is closing within 14 calendar days, that's not going to affect your participation rate. They don't get picked up. They clean that up at the, in the accountability calculations. So that's one consideration. Secondly, and I know for the purposes of LPAC, our expectation is to assess 100% of students. That's for the federal requirement. We have to assess them. And if we can't, for any reason, I know document, you've heard it a lot. But keep in mind too, for the dashboard, there's a 95% participation rate for LPAC expected, upon which if you don't meet that, then there would be an assignment of a loss there too, but it just defaults to a low status, not a very low status. It defaults to the low status if you don't meet your 95% of your students required to test on LPAC. Not saying that's great. And there is, we've had discussions about how that, can we identify somewhere on the dashboard an information item like to help LEAs explain the situation, and the CDE is amenable to that idea so that we can have some clarity if a district is identified as low, why they're low, maybe related to the participation rate and might have been impacted by the issues surrounding CALPADS. Well, I'm going to make sure that we get all these typed up and shared. I don't know if either of our assessment team members were here, but we definitely want to get these kind of. We'll walk through these and have some Q&A so we can have some specific answers for people that we can share out. And thank you for contributing everything there. I saw Peter. Is Peter still here? Oh, good. Okay, Peter dropped off.
Yep, here till 10 o'clock.
Okay, thanks, Peter. And I will say this is one of the best things about the network. A couple of you had said, I asked a couple of meetings ago, do you know anybody, any SELPA people? Because we really need a SELPA person. And a couple of people said, oh, Peter Johnson from Southwest is great. And so I emailed Peter. He emailed me right back. We got on the phone. He was incredibly helpful. And I'm not going to put him on the spot completely, but I did share with him. And this is, I gathered some slides and just some thoughts from Corey Stacy, who's the Riverside County SELPA data person. And I shared those with him. He said, those are pretty spot on. So I shared the entirety of the slide presentation and the agenda. But I wanted to go through some of the big ones, and Peter weighed in on any of these, and then I did my best to summarize some of Peter's thoughts at the end, but hopefully you can add anything more. So this is what Corey had said. Just initially, just what the SELPA experience was. And I do think there's a kind of a lack of visibility, at least there was when I was in the position. I didn't necessarily know what was going on through SACE. I couldn't see SACE. I couldn't tell what was going on in it. So I think it's important to kind of get this perspective. But currently, this is as of last week, by the way, so you can see where fixes have been put in. I've updated that. But these were the common issues that were known to affect the SACE to CALPADS. These false validation errors, which were frequent. And I think, Peter, you even indicated that in case you uploaded 100 files and had how many errors come back?
Just a handful. And actually, I even have an update for you from our discussion last week. Large district was able to push 800 transactions through over the weekend.
Okay.
And what they did was the cherry picking, which you'll get to a little bit later, but sending pending transactions, then sending initial IEP transactions. And of the 800 transactions submitted, only 7 errored back. So it's getting better.
Great. Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. So it did sound like from what Corey had initially said, and I'm just checking the known issues list, that several of these were pending or had been implemented. There's one 6073 is pending, so that maybe even that was as of last night, so maybe that's been in. Additionally, she noted the problem, and this was that communication problem related to the API, and it's that conversation going back and forth. And I don't know if this has been resolved or not, but it's just, it wasn't really visible. The fact that CALPADS changed the stages and upload goes through a path to posted or rejected, but SACE hadn't updated their status names to match. And this is SACE specific. So if a refresh is requested and the status that comes back isn't one SACE recognizes, then it drops connection on that submission and makes you start over again. So you don't really know what went through or what didn't. So there's like kind of blindness on the side of the SEDS. So on the CalPAD side, that submission is still going through to post and rejected, but there's no connection between them anymore. So if the SPED records are all posted, SACE doesn't know it and makes you submit them again, potentially causing one of the validation problems to occur because it doesn't want you to send up duplicate records. So you don't get the all clear posted message from CalPADS. So SACE won't allow users to send up the SSRV records to go with the SPED records. Any updates on this, Peter? Is this improved at all?
My belief is most of this is cleared up.
Okay.
I certainly concur with Corey on this when she wrote it 10 days ago. And in the last 10 days, I believe this really is coming out of the API communication problems between CalPADS and SEDS and not sending errors back to the SEDS. And I think this has been streamlined. I cannot say it's not happening at all, but I think most of it is functional now.
And I do think this was also marked as fixed on that known issues list. I wasn't sure of such a long list. So just in terms of our concerns about end of year reporting, and I think Suhan noted that the post-secondary transition file concerns. So she noted that the CELP has mixed reactions regarding the delay of the start of end of year reporting. While the delay was inevitable, given the state of CalPADS, the countdown clock to the last day of school, the certification deadlines, which have not adjusted yet, they have adjusted in terms of when it will open, I guess, but not when it'll close. Everybody can hear the clock ticking, right? People being gone, and what we talked about earlier. The inability for checking end of year reports, either they're not available, faulty, or don't contain relevant data, given the issues with data submissions and the change in the validation checks of the data and lack of upcoming data discrepancy report, made her nervous about the number of corrections that will be needed to fix inaccurate data already in CalPADS. Does that still sound true, Peter? Is there much change on this front?
There's no change on this front.
Okay.
I think, the EOI reporting is what it is, right? So nothing's changed on this.
Yeah. Without the reports and without knowing what errors exist, you really kind of are in the dark right now.
Yeah.
And then I just summarized some of her additional thoughts. I encourage you to take a look at the full presentation. She really has a good insights, as does Peter. She did note that submissions are faster. So that part is working, right? Especially if your data is clean. So the intent was met. The SPED file redesign being pushed back into 2023 is good news. Since more time is needed to avoid the problem seen with the post-process redesign. It's very complex. And so best not to rush these things. Obviously, we've learned that. There's a new compliance improvement monitoring program that started by the CDE this year. And the original plan was to pull the data at the end of June, and that was a cause of concern for the CELPAs due to the reliability of the CalPADS data. The CDE has said that they would delay that data pull until the redesign issues are resolved, but I think there's still a lot of concerns about that and what's accurate, what's not, and it's certainly the time in which to respond to those problems. So as I know, the full presentation is linked in the agenda. Peter, I'm going to go into your slide or your notes, and I don't think I did it justice, so please feel free to kind of. I asked Peter what you could be working on now, and these are some of the thoughts that he had, and I feel free to just take over if you'd like and add anything to this you want or correct anything from our conversation.
Yeah, so obviously we know there's issues getting data out of SACE, but we still, on the special education side, have our core mission of writing IEPs for our students and affirming or saving that data in our SED system. And that is still fully functional. Of course, reporting out, a little buggy, but as we approach the end of year, what we should be doing anyway is working with our teams to make sure the IEPs are written, that they are saved. In SACE, we use the term affirmed, and that generates a transaction. So generating transactions in our special education data systems is still operational. And at least we can generate them. And this is really the focus. Now, when we move to reporting them, the cherry picking, what we can do is, at least in SACE, we can look through all of the transactions created by all of our IEPs or our students that have transferred or those students undergoing initial IEP or those students that exited. And those give us different categories or types of transactions. And we can cherry pick and basically report a subset. And that's what I've recommended to my colleagues in the Southwest SELP, and that's what I think they're beginning to do and have some success with. For example, we can find the transactions for students that are just undergoing their initial IEP. The assessment plan has been signed. It's actually less data to report, and there's probably not much up SPED related in CALPADS for that student. So those are going through pretty well without major error issues. Then the SACE operator can also look at the initial evaluations or the initial IEPs that occurred and send those up. And you can kind of move through this chronology, taking slices of your transactions. And instead of sending up 400, 500, 600 in one file, by doing this cherry picking and slicing them, you're getting a smaller file going through, potentially less errors. And you're also focusing on the beginning of a student career rather than the annuals and the triennials, and you kind of get to those a little bit later. As I mentioned, I was speaking with a SACE operator yesterday, our largest district. She moved essentially 800 transactions through over the weekend. And she was doing this slice and it worked. Only 7 errors on 800 transactions, which is a rather phenomenal result. I can't say all of our other districts have yet replicated that, but it's possible. And that gave me a lot of hope for getting our data through. So I think the API is functional. I do know there are buggy errors that are bouncing back from CALPADS. They're not all cleared yet. Well, I think we're more functional than we were 10 days ago.
So I have a couple of questions that came in, Peter, if you can answer this. Margarita Rodriguez asked, does it also generate the SSRV? So you're
yes. So at least in SACE, and I can imagine in the other data systems, when our IEP team writes an IEP, of course, they're writing it as one document. When we save or affirm that data, SACE splits the IEP information into the SPED record or SPED file, and then into the SSRV or services file. And so the SACE operator really sees those two different files. The IEP teams, they don't see that. And when the SACE operator is sending files through, the pending records, for example, are only SPED data because there are no services yet because there hasn't been the initial IEP. So the type 30 SPED files are SPED only. When you get to the initial IEP, if the student was found eligible and served, then some of those initial IEPs will have the SSRV files attached or going along with the SPED file. So the SSRV data is going through. Yeah, it is working. But just to let you know, our teams don't see the two files, but our SACE operators do see the two files. And that cherry picking takes the SPED and the SSRV file together. That's going to be a requirement. But SACE will do that normally or naturally in how it's designed to work through the API.
Thanks for clarifying that. And Sue Ann asked how your large district was doing the slicing of the data, but that's just kind of narrowing down. You gave me more detail. It's very specific to SACE, but basically, I don't know if you can put that in a nutshell, describe how you do it, but I know you can.
Yeah, it really is this cherry picking. So again, SACE is the only database that I know, but I know this large district had 800 transactions kind of pile up. And that SACE operator was just beside herself because she never lets it get that high. But the problems of the last month piled up to 800. So she did the cherry picking. She sorted those 800 by essentially by meeting type or transaction type. And she found all of her 30s, which were the pending records that we set up once the assessment plan is signed. And we have a little checkbox, and she just checked off those 30s, created a file of maybe 30 of these, so to speak, and she just sent them through. So she had 770 left. And she looked for the meeting type 10s and cherry picked, checked off the 10s. And in SACE, we can create a generic report that's just going to grab all 800, or we can cherry pick any of those 800. We could send a transaction into CalPads or a SPED file with only one transaction if we wanted to. And sometimes we do that if we're just working on one kid trying to clean something up. And this is another recommendation that I've provided to my SACE operators. If they're working with, their testing coordinator or others, and they know that a few of these students are having problems with TOMS, et cetera. We know we need to get the SPED data in for all of our kids. But if we have some kids that are just, dead in the water for assessment right now, we can cherry pick those SPED records for those kids, creating a smaller file that has less of a chance of just getting aired out and send it through. So it's really cherry picking individual transactions in SACE based on the meeting type, going through from the pending to the initial, and then moving on to annuals and triennials later, or also going in, and if you're hearing from your testing coordinator, we're having kids, they can't be tested. We can cherry pick those transactions out and get them out of SACE up into CalPads, which of course will then enable TOMS ultimately.
Thank you for that. A couple other notes, not necessarily questions for you. I saw Enrique, someone in communication with Welligent for LAUSD on having something similar to this. I don't know. I will talk to our special education folks here to see if they've been having any, first of all, if there have been problems with that. That would be, I always think I worked in LA Unified for 10 years, so I know how big it is. You think you have all the resources, and yet, we've had communications recently around English learners, around testing. And I know that, just because you're big doesn't mean you have a perfect answer for some of these issues that arise. So I also saw that I like your answer. Kenneth Owens points out that he's on EduPoint Synergy because they must have their own special education data system. And he's been cherry picking and effectively been putting that files up. That's his errors. And the fix for 0546 that was just implemented was partially, mostly successful. Partially, mostly. That's progress. Okay. I saw a conversation going on here, and Jan from Aries, you mentioned, I saw you weigh in, and this is something that I think a bunch of people probably heard if they're in the CalPads. But thank you, Peter. I'm going to be moving on. I really appreciate you joining us and all your time the other day.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great. The question around the SENR file, the need to separate it out. I know Sean Walker had weighed in earlier about using Notepad++ to do that. But Jan, I just read that the conversation was that the new system requires the splitting of the SENR file, and that the SIS vendors were working on that as basically a permanent fix to now in the future, moving forward, split that file. Jan, can you weigh in on what the timeline is so people can have a sense? And you may be planning on sharing this with your.
Well, like I tried to capture in the chat, they had been telling districts and us all along that they knew it was an issue that sending exits and enters in the same file was causing issues in their system, but they kept alluding to the fact that they were trying to fix it on their end. And it wasn't until this last Thursday vendor call that they said, no, we can't fix it on your end. You're going to have to now send up deletes and exits first for SCNR records, and actually it's going to flow into other extracts and have those post, and then before you send up the additions, because it's analyzing each line separately but not writing the results of that to the ODS system underneath like it used to do in the legacy system. Mm-hmm. So it can read the exits okay, you're sending up an exit date and reason, but then on the subsequent enrollment record it fails because still in CalPads that would create the overlapping open enrollment within your LEA, which was not allowed. Mm-hmm. So we used to be able to send them fine in the files, but now we can't. So we're left to deal with the fallout from that.
And do you have a sense of how long that'll take for areas to get?
We're just started developing it the day after, and we're gonna release it as soon as possible. I
Okay.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
It's our highest priority right now.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's probably what you'd be talking about.
And I'm, you know, the other vendors can speak to what they're doing, but
Yeah,
that's just
yeah,
how we're handling it
yeah.
at this point in time, because rather than argue with them that they shouldn't have broke it, we have to make our customers able to submit their files.
That's right. And Evan, if I can interject, this is one of those things where my text earlier, this is a significant redesign. I mean, this has nothing to do with improving speed. This is a completely new business process that I don't think is adequately being addressed in these drive-by Q&A sessions. Like, I need a day where we walk through, this was the old process and this is the new process, because it's that confusing. And I really feel strongly about that. I hope the vendors, could accommodate that, or even CalPADS and ETS, because this is all new territory. These are all new business processes that none of us was anticipating, right?
Yeah, and I do think, I think it kind of came as a surprise last week. I'm not saying that this will result in anything that would be the level. I'm sure the vendors will provide that level of training, but there was a district in the Friday Q&A that had 20,000 students. I think that was someone who had consistently already been splitting their SCNR files and submitting them separately as the new process demands. And they were kind of surprised to find there was a district of 22,000. And people asked, can we have her on to talk about the process, because people want to get moving, and it can be done. And I've talked to Sean Walker about this, and she's got recommendations. And I won't try to reiterate them because I'm not qualified, but yeah, it is a big lift, and I think that was clearly it's evolving. It was first it was going to be fixed, and now it's changing. So that's something I've noted, and we'll share with with the CD folks. I note that it's already 10 o'clock, and I know I want to get to the breakout, so I'm just going to quickly skip through these. I know I almost feel bad. Back in February, I thought, oh, good, we have actually time we can talk about, best practices for end-of-year reporting and who to talk to, which is kind of my sweet spot. Best practices for data governance, and then this all happened, so invariably we didn't get to it. But I do have slides here. May 23rd is when they're promoting that the end of year will open, so we can start to see what kind of certification areas we have. Fingers crossed. But yeah, as of right now, the submission certification deadlines, nothing else has changed. I'm not going to go into it. I think if you have concerns about where these data go, take a look through here, and I'm happy to jump on a call with you to kind of explain the significance. But we have a lot of, I'm going to just kind of skip forward to, there are a lot of elements of the dashboard covered within the end of year submissions that really do beggar the question, like, who's looking at this data to make sure it's right. And I've talked to districts. My own district was guilty of this. So 1 year, if it's missed, it goes up on the dashboard, and it's a black eye, and it can't be fixed. That's often the biggest frustration. It's like, oh, clearly we had an A through G completion rate higher than 3%, but hey, it's locked in, it's hermetically sealed. You can't access it and change it after the fact. So take a look through here. If you have any questions about best practices, please get a hold of Hillary and me. And then I want to just skip through, because in talking to Sean Walker the other day, and also in talking to Wendy Rapp and others, one of the things that really jumped out was people will listen when it's the dashboard, that people being your superintendents, assistant superintendents, when it's the dashboard, or if it's money. And I just wanted to let you know about this tool that I put in it's linked here. It's also linked in the agenda. But I just want to bring it up. I do think this is really helpful. My colleague, Rebecca Aguilar from Fresno County Office of Ed, created this as kind of a nice summary. She vetted it with Brandy, and she also vetted it with a number of the state and federal program folks. And it's really just a nice process for figuring out, I know we've talked about this before, but for the school lunch program, if you're wondering what the universal meals requirement means for your district, because there is a mandate now, if you have 40% or higher free and reduced lunch, there's a mandate now to switch over to a provision school or a community eligibility provision school, CEP. And the impact for collecting the alternate income forms is spelled out really nicely here. And it gives you a Q&A. I highly recommend sharing this with your state and federal program people, because it's pretty clear here what you can collect, what you can't not collect. Jaime and I just went over this for Montebello because they're moving and they're becoming a CEP school. And so what does that mean for them? What is it? How, having never been a CEP district, I should say, what does that mean? What should they collect? So I definitely recommend taking a look through here. And here's a great sample of a base year for a CEP school. So next year for a lot of schools, because it's a requirement next year, if you have 40%, if you weren't already a CEP district, I should say, it's laid out what the process would be. And so for students who don't qualify through direct certification or through other eligibility criteria, you want to collect that alternate income form in that first year. And that, if it's a CEP school, for example, that initial alternate income form will serve that student for the duration of their years. What you do have to make sure is that you get a program record 181 or 182 in there every year. That's what qualifies for the LCFF. So that's the key part. And then you want to make sure you maintain that documentation. Your base year documentation does not have to be sent to the CDE, but your auditors will come looking for it. So you want to have a means of making sure you have all that initial information collected and stored, because your auditors will come asking for it and you want to make sure it's accurate. And then after that initial base year, then you just have to capture students who transfer in, make sure that you get an alternate income form for them, and make sure that you're communicating to parents the importance. And that's why I think start early and get the communication plan. We talked about this last time, but having a plan in place to let parents know the importance, with an emphasis on the benefits for their student, such as the waivers. Get there. Oh. Maybe I deleted that slide. Oh wait, there it is. Yeah, the benefits to students, including waivers for AP testing, others, and also the benefits to the district, the funding that brings in. So through LCFF, and then the supplemental concentration funding is very important, and money speaks. So last thing here, I just wanted to note assignment monitoring. I think Rebecca, you may have asked if she could bring your HR people. I knew we wouldn't get to much, but the assignment monitoring window is opening August 1st. They pushed it back. And just if any of you get asked about a data file with the teacher assignment information, we're still waiting for that. That's actually supposed to be the 2020-2021 teacher misassignment data, which is actually the CalSAS data from last year, but then filtered through the CDE's teacher equity division to apply the federal definitions. We're still waiting for that. So this process is really critical to clarify your misassignments, but it won't open until August 1st. So there's time to get schooled, and I included the links in the chat, I believe, or actually, and then for all these resources. So if you have folks who are going to be working on, new folks who are working on assignment monitoring, these are all the resources we've shared in the past. So that said, parent guardian, I'm not going to touch on that right now. I'll send out clarification. We're still waiting for guidance on the parent guardian. I know a lot of folks have concerns about the parent guardian, both parent guardian education status. But if you have additional questions, drop them in the chat now. And we will, like I said, I'm going to summarize these questions, try to get some guidance out for people who aren't here, and just clarification for those of you who are here. But some of the questions we're going back and forth, so we can have some clarity for everybody in our network. And we are, yes, Sue Ann, we're waiting for fixes with a deep cleansing breath. A lot of deep breaths are helpful. We have the vendor breakouts, and I think we did get a last minute addition. I saw Equity CALPADS did show up. Thank you for dropping that in. James, thank you for dropping that in. Appreciate that. And Hillary, do you have the page, the other links for our Power School and our Aries breakouts? You drop that in the chat. And I am sure they're going to address a lot of these questions in those breakouts as well. I appreciate your patience, and I really do wish you all the best in getting through this really trying time, this very demanding time. And if you have any concerns, if you are new, I've referred a couple of newbies, including Jaime, to our veterans. If you are new or feel overwhelmed right now, reach out to us or drop something in the chat here, direct message us, and we'll see if we can connect you with someone who shares your student information system that's similar to size district to try to help you out. To all of you, have a very good day. I'm going to keep everything open. Hillary, you can stop recording now. We'll just let everybody filter out and join your breakout session.